There it is. All right. That's my my FM radio DJ voice there. I got it because some of these guys up here took me out drinking last night, and we had to yell over music, and so it's their fault. Hey, my name is Jeff Gothelf. I'm thrilled to be here, really, genuinely thrilled to be here. I am from the US, as you can probably tell by my accent, and I actually live in Spain now. So this was a relatively short trip for me, and I'm really excited to be here. In one of the amazing things, I landed here on Wednesday. It's my first visit ever, and my Airbnb is up near the Acropolis, and it was pretty amazing for me to see the Acropolis, and then to see the Parthenon up there. And it's a thing that I've seen in movies and in books my whole life growing up, and it was a fairly emotional moment for me, which is pretty amazing. I love movies, and kind of seeing these things in real life always helps out. Speaking of movies, my favorite movie is Goodfellas. Thank you. All right, we good? Let's go drink. No, I'm just kidding. How many of you have not seen Goodfellas? Let's just kind of get a sense. Okay, like 3 hands. Okay, we could pause for like 2 hours and watch it and come back. No, it's awesome. If you don't know it, it's a gangster movie, and perhaps the best scene in the movie is this scene here. Now, what's happening in this scene, if you haven't seen the movie, you've got Ray Liotta, Joe Pesci, and Robert De Niro. They have a problem in the back of Ray Liotta's car, and they've got to stop in at Joe Pesci's mom's house to get a knife to solve that problem that's in the back, a big knife, to kind of solve the problem that's in the back of the car. Now, she's Italian, and she wakes up when they come in, and she invites them to sit down and eat, right? It's the middle of the night, and they can't say no. And as the conversation goes on, the scene evolves into what I think is the best scene in the entire movie, where Pesci says one of the best lines in the entire movie. Now, you're lucky because I have the clip right here, and so I'm going to play it for you, and I have my volume all the way up, so we'll see what happens.
Tom, you ever tell you about my painting?
No.
Look at this.
Ah, it's beautiful.
I like this one. One dog goes one way and the other dog goes the other way. One is going east and the other one is going west. So what?
And this guy's saying, what do you want from me?
Nothing happened. Can we try again? Let's try one more time, really quick. See if it plays this time.
Tom, you ever tell you about my painting?
No.
Look at this.
Ah, it's beautiful.
I like this one. One dog goes one way and the other dog goes the other way. One is going east and the other one is going west. So what?
And this guy's saying, what do you want from me?
That's it. If you couldn't hear it, essentially what Pesci says, she says, he says, I like this painting. I got one dog going one way, I got one dog going the other way, and I got this guy in the middle saying, hey, what do you want from me? Right? And it's funny because it's Pesci, right? Whatever. I have a client in the U.S. who reminded me of this scene recently when we were talking. He's a manager, and he's training his teams to be agile. He works in a bank, and he's in charge of digital transformation. And he's training his teams to be agile. He's got product owners, he's got designers, he has programmers, and he's trying to figure out how to do the right thing. And so what he's doing, right? This is what he told me, right? He said, "Look, I've got my slide. Where's the slide? I've got my tech guys learning Agile over here, right? I got one dog going one way. I've got my my product owners over, one dog going the other way. I got my product owners learning Lean over here, and I've got my designers kind of going another way, learning design thinking. And what I've got is I've got me in the middle, kind of wondering, hey, I'm training these guys, and they're not working together. I'm not seeing the benefits. I'm not seeing the coordination. I'm not seeing the improvements, right? But I'm doing everything that I was told to do, and he's like, hey, what do you want from me, right? I'm the guy in the middle. I got one dog going this way. I got one dog going that way, and everyone in the middle is, and I'm in the middle trying to figure out how to make all these teams play nice together. And he's like, what do we do? How do we actually solve this problem? And the fascinating thing is that this is a problem that a lot of organizations have. Now, interestingly enough, if you work in a startup, most startups don't have this problem at all, right? Because startups have small teams, and so there's no time to debate the process that we're using or who's going to do what. You've got a set number of people, you know what they're going to do, you know what you can't do, you know what's going to happen if you make the wrong decisions, right? And you know what's going to, if you make enough wrong decisions, you're going out of business, right? So you work quickly, and you generally don't have this problem of debating, like, are we going to go agile? Are we going to go lean? Are we going to do design thinking? But the interesting thing is that as your company grows, right, in the enterprise, things start to change. You have more money, you have more people, right? You have more time. You can hire specialists, right? And you can spin towards new projects and new initiatives almost indefinitely, because it doesn't seem like you're ever going to run out of money, and it certainly doesn't seem like you're ever going to get fired, right? You make a few mistakes, but you don't really get fired. You just kind of move around. And because you're big and because you're successful, you assume that you already know everything, right? We're big, we're successful, look, we got it. We don't actually need to build learning into the way that we do. And yet, with every company that I work with, and I work with large companies primarily, right? They all want to be like a startup. They've all got these two talking heads inside every large company. They want to be agile and they want to be lean, and I want to be agile and they want to be lean, and they want to be like a startup. You hear this language over and over and over again. And the fascinating thing, right, at least in my experience, is that as you start to scale these processes of lean and agile and design thinking into big companies, right, they start to break. The processes break. And it's not clear why, right? All the literature generally talks about small teams, but you have 50 teams or 500 teams, this stuff starts to break. So I asked the question, I said, why does lean seem to break at scale? Why does agile seem to break at scale? And I did some scientific research about this. And by scientific research, I mean I asked Twitter about this. And I got some really great responses from Twitter about this as well. And I don't know if you can see all of these. I've got a few up here, and I'll read them out to you. And maybe they sound familiar to you, but there's all kinds of responses that came back. These were just the highlights, right? We already know what we need to do, so why waste time learning, right? Quote unquote learning. Process, everything has a process and 85 approvals and a mysterious they blocking anything that's not the old way. Upfront business cases and plans to make anything successful or get anything funded. Silos. Valuing the business needs over the user needs. So let's cut costs and make sure that we're making money as opposed to making customers successful. And then lastly, being concerned about tarnishing our brand with MVPs and experiments. And I hear these excuses over and over and over again in all of my, in my work, certainly with the companies that I work with. And so the question then becomes, how? How do we start to move these big organizations past these hurdles? Because the story's the same. Everywhere you go, every big company, the same stories come up, right? And so there's a couple ways to think about scaling that I'm going to introduce to you today. I'm going to give you some tactics, some principles, and some tactics to take home with you so you can start practicing some of this stuff on Monday. First of all, at the very least, your organization can start to think about scaling at 3 different levels, right? The first level is the project level. And the question that you're asking at the project level, right, is how do we incorporate more learning into each initiative, right? If you've got these agile delivery initiatives, right, how do we start to build more learning, more discovery into each project? As you scale up into multiple projects, program levels, right, the question changes. The question changes to how do we coordinate multiple discovery and delivery efforts focused on the same goals? You've got 5 teams or 10 teams or 50 teams working on the same product or the same initiative. How do we get more discovery happening and still deliver on our goals? And then lastly, right, at the portfolio level, which is kind of the highest, the business unit level or the company level, how do we coordinate multiple programs? Right, the questions get tougher, the answers get tougher. How do we enforce governance, right, regulation, that type of thing, and how do we meet shareholder expectations? And what's interesting is that you start to unravel those questions, the issues that keep you from answering those questions effectively start to get bigger and bigger and more challenging, right? So at the project level, for example, right, the issues that start to come up immediately at the project level are things like this. Things like, where is it? Is it not gonna go? Oop, there it is. Things like, There they are. Optimizing for throughput, right? You've heard so much about velocity today. I was watching a couple talks earlier today. Teams working towards velocity, right? Velocity means getting code out the door. High quality, scalable, secure code out the door. But that's not your definition of success. That may be your definition of done, but does that code actually solve real problems? We don't know. For real customers, we have to make sure. All right? How do we build discovery into delivery at the same time? Teams generally don't have the right to, autonomy to make decisions. So even if they're building discovery learning into the way that they work, right, they don't have the ability to change what they're working on or how they're working on it. And the mindset is incremental, right, for these teams. Let's make stuff, and then let's make more stuff, and then let's make more stuff. And people are afraid that we'll keep experimenting on our customers. We're going to tarnish our brand. Now, at the program level, these challenges start to scale. You've got to coordinate multiple teams, right? You've got to manage knowledge. Why did we decide that over here? Maybe we shouldn't do that again over here. How do we actually get this communication to happen? You're dealing with legacy systems in most cases as you start to scale. And then you start to run out of people. So you're either offshoring, right, which starts to break the collaboration cycle, or you're distributing your teams across different campuses in different countries and different time zones, which again makes collaboration and shared understanding and learning difficult. Now, the problems get even worse as you scale up into the business side of things, right? As you scale up into the portfolio level, the problems get hairier. I promise there's solutions coming, right? Not just problems, okay? But at the portfolio level, you start to deal with silos, right? The design team doesn't talk to the engineering team, or this business unit doesn't talk to that business unit. This one's a big one. IT is a service provider, right? Let's be clear, and I heard somebody else say this today as well. If you are a business of scale, or a business that seeks to scale in the 21st century, you are first and foremost in the software business. Okay? You are a software company first and a bank second, or an insurance company or a grocery store second, right? IT is not the guys who make the app over here. Right? IT is how we do business, which means it has to be woven into every practice of our business, which is marketing, HR, product development, and so forth, right? Business value is seen as more important than customer value. As long as we're generating shareholder value, who cares about the customers? Annual planning cycles, attempting to predict the future, right? We know today what will happen in 2018, so let's set aside some money and decide on what we're going to build and hope that it works out. Incentive structures, again, designed towards incremental product delivery, governance. And my favorite one down here is Conway's Law, but in reverse. Conway's Law is the law that says that we build systems that mimic our organizational structure. Right? And so you've got companies that have built systems that mimic this old way of working, this kind of traditional way of working, and now they're trying to change the way that they're working, and their systems don't adapt and don't adjust to that, so they can't move forward. And so then how do you fix this? How do you fix all this stuff? Well, if you're a manager or an executive or transformation lead or team lead or whatever, you go out to the internet, right? And there's no shortage of recipes about how to solve for this. And you've heard these names and you've heard all these different things, right? Lots of people want to tell you how to scale lean, how to scale agile, how to scale design thinking. And perhaps one of the most fascinating and horrible diagrams that's come from this is if you're a manager, you start to kind of search for ways to improve the way that your team is working. And you inevitably end up at a diagram that essentially looks like this. It's like the metro line to hell, right? What this is, look, this diagram is horrible, but it's not horrible for the reason that you think. I mean, design choices aside, what this unfortunate consultant did was he took all the agile stuff that's out there today, the methods, the processes, the techniques, all the different methodologies, and he plotted them out on a London tube map, right? But this, and that's not the reason that this is horrible. This is horrible because this is reality. This is true, right? This is the agile landscape. And if you're a manager or a company trying to understand how to scale, right, this is what you have to decide. Right? Which one of these stops do we pick? Which of these tactics, right? And if you're a manager and this is the first time you're seeing something like this, it probably makes you feel, right, a little bit like this guy, like this little kid right here. And the first time that I saw this particular diagram, right, to kind of go back to our Goodfellas reference, is I actually felt a little bit like Henry Hill over here, right? When I saw that diagram, it's just sort of like, this is the most ridiculous thing. And I felt bad. I felt bad for managers, right? And perhaps the most popular recipe that's being adopted right now, at least again in my experience with the companies that I work with, is SAFe. How many familiar with SAFe, the Scaled Agile Framework? It's an Agile conference. Wow, that's it? That's amazing. You consider yourselves very lucky. Well done. You've insulated yourselves from this. This is plaguing all the companies in the U.S. and certainly in Western Europe as well, as it's starting to take. And this is the Scaled Agile framework. Now, this is an attempt to scale agility into large companies, and managers love this. And do you know why managers love SAFe, particularly if you're familiar with it? It's because they can see themselves in the picture, right? And I'm still at the top of the diagram. And that's what matters to me, right? I'm at the top. I'm still in control. I still tell people what to do, and I don't have to change what I do as a manager. Everybody else has to change, but not me. And companies are adopting this left and right as if it's the silver bullet to scaling agility. But the reality is this: all of these processes, lean, agile, lean startup, SAFe, lean UX, you name it, right? These are all frameworks. They're starting points. It's a good place to start, right? If you want to use SAFe as a starting point, that's fine. These are not your destinations. There's no recipe that solves these problems for your organization. What you want to do instead of scaling these processes is to scale principles, specific principles about the way you'd like to work, right? What is agility in our company? How does it work? And what are the principles that help agility grow as our company grows? I'm going to give you 4 principles. And for each one of those principles, I'm going to give you a few tactics to think about how to execute and drive those principles into the way that you work. Okay, here's the first one. The first one is this: customer value and business value are the same thing. It's that simple. If you make your customers successful, if you respect their time, if you create experiences that are a delight to use, if you solve real problems for your customers in a meaningful way, they will reward you. They will buy your product. They will renew their subscriptions. They'll tell their friends. They'll buy more of your products the next time you put one out, right? They'll tell the whole internet about it. If you make your customers successful, you have to focus all of your efforts on making your customers successful. And that works at any scale, at the startup scale or at the enterprise scale. How do we make our enterprise banking clients successful? Let's talk about that. Let's figure it out, because if they're successful, they buy more stuff from us. Now, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to keep the customer front and center of every conversation. And one of the best ways to do this is with this concept called OKRs. How many of you are familiar with OKRs? Okay, not the ones who were in my workshop yesterday. You guys don't count, right? Because I taught it yesterday, that's all. That's why they don't. Okay, OKRs, right? Objectives and key results. I'm going to give you a really short version of it, but if you want the slightly longer version, Christina Whitkey's book, Radical Focus, is perfect, right? OKRs are again, a simple concept that's difficult to implement. Two components, objectives and key results. Objectives is our qualitative goal for our project or for our company, right? We want to be the best at something. We want to be the most successful, the biggest, the dominant, whatever. And we want to time box it, right? By the end of the year, we want to be the biggest e-commerce company in Greece, right? We want to be the largest digital bank in Greece, right? So those are qualitative metrics that we want to say by a particular year. Now, the key results side of this is the how will we know part of this. Right? How do we know? How will we know that we are the biggest or the most successful digital bank in Greece? Right? Well, we measure customer behavior. We set these metrics, right? This is the quantitative side of the equation. And these metrics that we set are measures of customer behavior, right? How did we make customers successful? How do we know, right? And you can set these at all levels of the organization so that you never forget about the customer, because your goal at the end of the day is not to ship a feature, but it's to hit that key result. I'm going to give you an example because I understand it's a little abstract. So I'm going to show you an example from one of my clients, okay? This is a company that works in the automotive space, okay? And they're a B2B company, okay? Not B2C. They work with OKRs. Now, their objective is to be the dominant platform for car dealer inventory management. That's what they do, right? Car dealer inventory management by the end of the year. We want to be the dominant platform. That sounds great. How will we know? 50% of all independent dealers are our users. That's a measure of customer behavior. You can put a team on that, or 2 teams, or 5 teams. 6 of the top 10 car makers mandate our platform for their dealerships. That's a different user. It's a different measure of user behavior. Customer behavior, we can put a team on that. And that's their measure of success. That's their definition of done. 40% of auto auction houses using our inventory API. Different customer, different measure of success, still a measure of customer behavior. And again, nothing in here specifies features, nothing in here specifies what you're going to make. What you're trying to do is make your customers successful. Now, if you start to manage to OKRs, you then have to discover how to hit those numbers, because no one told you what to build, right? You didn't tell the team, go build this feature, and that will make us successful. Because they don't know, the team has to discover it. And so as they're learning how to solve for this OKR, they're collecting evidence. And it's with that evidence that you can actually shorten the cycle, the planning cycle, right? So you get a small team that's working together to ship ideas into market and to sense how well they are heading towards their OKR goals. And at the end of relatively short cycles, not a year, but maybe 3 months, 6 months if 3 months is still too short, right? But at the end of those cycles, that team comes up for refunding. They said, hey, we spent a quarter of the budget. Our goal was 50% of these customers using our product. We're at 32%. Here's what we learned. Here's what we've collected. Here's what we'll do next quarter if you let us go again. And now what we've done is we've given our executives the ability to make an evidence-based decision that says, hey, you're learning good things. You get another shot. You get another round, right? Go another 3 months, see if you can get to 50%. Now, the interesting thing is the team could also come back and say, listen, we're never going to hit 50%. It's never going to happen, right? Wouldn't you rather find that out 3 months into your budget rather than 12, right? Or maybe they come back after 3 months and they say, we hit it. We hit 50%. What do you want to do next, right? We've got 3/4 of the budget left, right? This is evidence-based planning that starts to reduce the planning cycle and always keeps the customer front and center of the conversation throughout the company. All right, that was our first principle. Customer value and business value are the same thing. Second principle, value learning over delivery. This is really difficult in tech-centric cultures and in heavy engineering cultures, right? Because we always talk about how quickly we can get code out the door, time to market, shipping these ideas first. But the idea is, how do we determine what to build? How do we determine what to work on? And the challenge, the biggest challenge is here, is you've got a team that's working. Hey, how you doing? You've got teams that are working towards velocity, right? And that's the velocity of delivery. But as soon as you start to build learning activities, right, into the process, the velocity of delivery goes down and the velocity of learning starts to come up. Teams have to do this, right? Your company has to do this if you want to scale agility, because learning tells you what to work on, not just how to build it, right? So then how do we do this? Well, first of all, if you're a big company and you don't work this way, the first thing that you do is you start with a pilot team. You do not try to change 10,000 people or 50,000 people overnight. You take one team or two teams. Right? Their measure of success is not return on investment. It's learning how to work this way. It's learning, it's process development, and then we scale what they learn to 2 teams and 5 teams and 10 teams. Now, as you start to scale, the challenge is going to be, how do we actually coordinate all of these teams towards the same goal? Klaus gave a great talk about this earlier today. I hope you had a chance to see it. If not, watch the video. But one other tactic that works really well is aligning all of these teams to the same OKR. Right? So you take 5 teams or you take 10 teams, and instead of giving them each a different OKR, you give them all the same OKR. This way they win or lose together. They have to figure out how to self-organize, and they have to figure out how to work together. And that's the key here. Otherwise, you're going to have one team spinning over here optimizing for one metric, and one team over here spinning optimizing for a second metric, and they don't care how they affect each other. Right? Because their incentive is to hit their own goal. Give them the same metric to work on. Sandboxes are really important, again, to drive this culture of learning, not just digital sandboxes, but actually governance sandboxes. Organizations really worry about you going, some companies certainly worry about you going and talking to your customers. Right? Especially if we don't have a lot of customers. If we're a B2B enterprise, maybe we have 1,000 customers. We don't want to talk to everybody all the time. We don't want to bother them. Tell your teams what they can do, right? Set a boundary. You can talk to 10 customers a month, no more, okay? That's a good place to start. Show the value of 10, next month ask for 20, right? You can't talk to the same customer more than once a year. Okay. Set those boundaries, and then let the team start to figure out how to maximize their learning from that. Because when you constrain the space, your teams will get creative about how to learn, right? They build creative experiments. This is one of the most interesting, and to me, just creative experiments that I've managed to find on the internet. This is a bank team. You guys see what's happening here? This is a bank team that has to test touchless credit cards. Right? And they can't go to the store and try 10 different machines or 15 different machines, and they don't want to sit there all day tapping the cards. So they put the card on a model train, and it just spins past these devices to see how well it works all day. Right? Creativity thrives in constraints. Create those guidelines and give your teams room to learn. So we've got customer value and business value are the same thing. Learning over delivery. The third principle I want you to think about is radical transparency. This is the key to building trust, to building goodwill, and to getting your teams to work well together, and to be clear with managers about what's happening and why it's happening, and that's the key. Now here's how you start to build transparency into your company, because many companies like to be secretive, right? I don't want to tell you that I'm not doing well. I don't want to tell you that the product is failing or the process is failing. Here's the first thing. Rituals. Now, if you know anything about me or my work, you know that I'm not a capital A, agile, religious person. I'm more of a lowercase a, agility kind of person, right? But I do love some of the basic agile rituals, because those agile rituals build transparency. And why is this? By the way, I'm a kid of the 80s, Karate Kid. Yes, Karate Kid, right? Remember? Yes, right. This is exactly what happened in Karate Kid, right? Daniel-san goes to Mr. Miyagi. He says, listen, I want to learn karate. Right? Mr. Miyagi says, great, wax my car. Right? He's like, but I want to learn karate. He says, great, paint the fence. Right? What Daniel-san's not realizing is he's practicing these rituals, and eventually he's learning karate. Right? The same thing happens with the standard agile rituals. Stand-ups are terrific. Right? People initially don't understand why they're doing stand-ups. They don't. Right? But they build transparency. Every day you have to stand up in front of your colleagues and say what you're working on, what's getting in the way, what are challenges, right? And it gets really old really fast if some guy on the team gets up every day and says, hey, yesterday I bought some shoes online, right? Today I'm going to put some bets on the horses, right? And I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow. What's getting in my way? It's all this work I have to do, right? That gets old. That gets old very, very fast, right? But stand-ups build transparency. Transparency builds trust. Anything you can do to shed light on the work that you're doing as a team starts to demystify these changes that we're trying to incorporate in our companies. Scrum of Scrums, demo days, progress reports, emails, information radiators, right? Screens that talk about how projects are doing and metrics. All of this builds trust, right, and transparency. Another tactic that builds transparency is access to customers, right? Your ideas are great until you show them to customers, right? And then typically they suck. So let's get that out there as quickly as possible. Let's understand how to do this, right? This is what my friend David Bland out in California likes to say. We all have this concept of what we think is minimum and viable, and we get it out there. But the reality is that you can decide what's minimum, but it's the customer that decides if it's viable. Right? And so the sooner you can get access to customers, the sooner you can actually get ideas out, get a sense of how good your idea is working, and then you can actually be transparent about why you made specific decisions. And I think one of the most fascinating and frustrating examples of companies not talking to their customers is Juicero. I don't know if you guys have heard about the Juicero, but what this company actually did, right? They didn't make a juicing machine, right? The concept was that you could actually, it's this fancy juice press, and you had to buy these special packets, and it was a $700 machine. It turns out you could squeeze the packets by hand. Right? You didn't need the $700 juicing machine. You can just use your hands. They didn't talk to their customers. They didn't test this. And what they literally did was they took a pile of money, $120 million, and they set it on fire. Right? They burned it because they're out of business. That's it. They're gone. They took somebody else's $120 million and burned it because they didn't talk to their customers. That builds transparency. It builds humility. It builds trust in our decision making. Another thing that builds transparency is access to data. Make sure that you, your colleagues, your team, and your bosses know what's happening. Customer conversation tells you why it's happening. Analytics tells you what's happening, right? We want that 180-degree view. Don't keep data hidden behind BI queues or the amount of time that give everyone in the organization access to the analytics. That's the key here. That starts to build rationale for our decision making. That starts to build transparency. That starts to build trust. Here's the fourth and final principle. Okay, so we talked about customer value and business value being the same thing, valuing learning over delivery. We talked about transparency. The final principle is humility in all things. Okay, my favorite way to phrase this I learned from Janice Frazier out in California. Lots of good people in California. She says, look, strong opinions loosely held. Right, and I love that. You're smart people. We're all smart people. We all have experience and opinions about how to do our jobs and how to do it well. Okay? But if we start to learn that our opinions are wrong, and they often will be wrong, we are willing to change our mind. That's it. Strong opinions, loosely held. That's humility. And when you get that from the top, from leadership, from management, teams are much more likely to try more innovative solutions. Teams are much more likely to talk about what they're learning and to ultimately build better products. Now, there are tactics that help you build humility into the way that you work. One of my favorite is this concept of product discovery. It's taking your ideas, analyzing what the biggest risks are in your ideas, and then going out and making sure that you should actually work on this idea before, or how you should work on this idea before you spend 18 months developing it. That's exactly what Amazon did with the Echo, right? The biggest thing, the most important thing, the biggest risk that they had to learn was, what are people going to ask this thing? And then what's a good answer? Now, they could have guessed at that. They had a strong opinion, right? And they could have written 18 months worth of code for artificial intelligence and voice recognition. Instead, they ran a test, a product discovery, a Wizard of Oz test. And the test simply put a customer with the Echo in one room and a Google engineer in the other room, an engineer in the other room with a browser. And the customer would talk to the cylinder and there was nothing in it. And the engineer would hear it and they would run Google queries and feed the answer back to the customer. Right? Just to see, right, all they wanted to learn was what types of responses worked and what didn't work. That's humility. They could have said, we know exactly what people are going to do, and start writing code, and they would have made a mistake. Right? Here's another fantastic and amazing example that I just came across in this past week. Check out what's happening here. Can you see what's happening here? This is a guy. That's right. He disguised himself as the car seat. Right? And the question is, why did he do this? Right? Ford needed to research self-driving cars. Right? How will people react to self-driving cars? What's the feedback that we'll get from the market? Before we make a bunch of assumptions and put robots on the street, right, let's figure this out. Right? And it's amazing. And after he puts on this disguise, right, it looks like this. Right? Right? But this is human. Like, think about this. Like, how much did this cost? Right? What did this test cost for them? Right? It cost nothing, is what it cost. It cost the costume, right, and the guy's time and research, and that's what it looks like when he's driving the car, right? And why did they do this? The reason that they did this was to learn. Right? They had strong opinions, but they wanted to make sure how passersby and other drivers on the road and cyclists reacted to sharing the road with a driverless car, because that's important to writing the code for making a driverless car. That's humility, and that's product discovery. Now, as you start to scale your humility beyond the project level, you start to think about different ways of staffing and different ways of working. And if you're not an engineer, and if you're not a product manager, and you're not a designer, guess what? You know that your projects never see the light of day, right, until legal sees it, until finance sees it, or marketing, or HR helps you build your team. And so then how do we start to change our relationship with these other business units, right? Normally, there's a review at the end of the project, a legal review, and you've been working on something for 6 months or 9 months, and the legal review tanks everything, right? Or finance says, hey, we're out of budget, sorry you didn't build the thing in time, right? What if they checked in with us on a more regular basis, right? Once a week, the lawyer came by and sat with your team for half a day. Right? Teams are doing this today. What if HR checked in with you once a quarter to say, hey, how's the skill levels? Do we need new people? Do we need different skill levels? What can we train you on? Right? It starts to change how we work. Right? That's humility at the organizational level. Right? And as you think about this, There's other levels of humility to think about. Staffing models need to change. As we start to build these agile and lean teams that focus on customer centricity, continuous learning, and continuous improvement, there are jobs that may not be necessary anymore. Right? Can we take those same people and put them to use in a more effective way in our organization? Right? This is exactly what ING is doing in their transformation. Everybody at ING headquarters in Amsterdam had to interview for their jobs again. 60% of the people got to keep their old jobs, and 40% didn't. Right? They got to find new jobs, or they got out. And there are positions that maybe don't make sense as your agility increases. I'm going to say a couple job titles. It might make me unpopular with some people in the room, but I'm not suggesting that we fire these people. I'm just suggesting that there might be a better way to use their time, right? Project manager. That guy's not a project manager. Guaranteed, right? But do we need them, right? If you've got a self-organized team working towards an OKR, right? Can we put the project manager to better use, right? Business analyst versus product manager, right? No business analysts over there, right? The question is, do we need all of those roles? And if not, what are some better jobs that we can put those people on? And then lastly, and I think you guys, most of you know this better than I do, but creating the kind of tech stack that affords the capability for continuous learning. Specifically, I'm talking about DevOps. There's been lots and lots of conversations about that over the last couple of days. It's simply the ability to get ideas into market as soon as you can and to learn from those ideas. And it's not enough just to build these systems, but you have to actually provide people with access to these systems. So they start to rethink and retrain their brain about how and when we ship software. I grabbed these slides from my friend Bill Scott over at PayPal, right? We do away with this train mentality where the train leaves once an hour or once a month, and we think about it from a light rail, right? If I miss the release, there's another one in 5 minutes or 6 minutes, right? And as you think about your tech stack, right, and this is fascinating, right, as there's this kind of design ops movement that's happening. How can we fix the tech stack so that we can move very quickly from prototype to production, right? There's a lot of waste when you're prototyping, and if something actually works, how can we ship it even faster, right? Start to rethink how you build products, and that's humility as well. So, to kind of bring this home, a couple closing thoughts. Look, everything I talked about here today is difficult, and it's most likely a top-down effort, right? If you're in a leadership position, your teams want to work this way. They want to do this. Start thinking about how you can create the kind of environment that provides opportunities for your teams to do this. If you are not in a leadership position, I want you to find this person. Now, this person I like to call the shit umbrella, because that's their job. They're the executive who's already thinking this way. They're the one who's going to sponsor your pilot team, and they're going to shield you from all that organizational crap that kills these agility and lean and customer-centric efforts that move on there. Okay? So, to wrap up, the 4 principles I want you to scale when you go back to work on Monday look like this. Customer value and business value are the same thing. Value learning at least as much as delivery, if not over-delivery. Radical transparency, be open about everything that's happening, and then humility in all things. Thanks so much for having me here. It was a pleasure.